Hello guys, this is Amol Khedkar. I welcome you to this video. This is the first video in the series about the world in 2030 that I am doing on YouTube. And so the first country that I am tackling in this series is Australia. Okay, so I will be discussing this article from McCrindle, which is a pretty reputed magazine in Australia. And the title of this article is Australia Towards 2030. Before we get started, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel as I upload these kind of geopolitical and world economics news on a daily basis. And also check out this series that I am doing about all the G20 countries. Okay, don't forget to subscribe. So let's get started. So as we all know, Australia is a pretty isolated country. Okay, the borders of Australia are really all just connected with the ocean or the sea, right? So there is not even a single country that borders Australia. That's why that country always has had a sort of defensive approach towards everything. Okay, so Australia is like it's like a white country in a sea of brown countries. Okay, so that's what many people think about Australia as. So it's a white majority country in a sea of brown countries. So what are the sea of brown countries? Like Indonesia, Malaysia, what Philippines, then Singapore, or even Fiji, right? So all of these are brown countries, and Australia is the only white country. That's why they have a sort of defensive approach. Okay, recently, you might have heard in the news that if you arrive by boat in Australia, okay, all of these people are kept in detention camps in an island called Nauru, okay, which is close to Australia. So Australia has had this kind of anti-immigrant rhetoric for a long time now. This is not the first time. There were protests in Australia in 2009, 2010 regarding foreign students getting very racist treatment. Okay, and I do have many friends living in Australia right now as well, and the kind of accounts that I've heard from them are just not that very rosy. Okay, to be very frank with you. Okay, so I'll just go through the 5 points that they mention in this article. So growing population. Like many other nations, Australia's population is growing at an unprecedented rate. In 2018, Australia's population surpassed 25 million, right? If this pace continues, Australia's population will reach 40 million people by the middle of this century. Okay. Australia's two largest cities, Sydney and Melbourne, are both projected to reach a population of 8 million by the middle of this century, equivalent to the current size of London. Okay. So where is all this population growth coming from, right? Only immigration, nothing else. Australia is also just another poster child of what exactly it means by unfettered immigration and very low birth rates and very low death rates. Okay, so the people that are in Australia, they are not dying. People, then new people are not getting born. That's why they need to spur the population growth somehow, and the only way of doing that is just bringing people from outside. Okay, so that's what many of the countries in the world are trying to do. Okay, so that's why I've made videos about this where I say that immigration is the only source of population growth for all of these Western countries, and that's how they market their agenda to the rest of the world. Okay, so the Hollywood movies are just a marketing tool for Western countries to entice people to come to America, to come to Canada, to come to Australia. Okay, and so this growth will likely result in a continued rise in the number of vertical communities, rising house prices, and increased investment in infrastructure and services. Right now, Australia is facing a huge amount of housing bubble. Okay, just look at the cities like Sydney, Melbourne, okay, Perth. All of these cities are just having a very big housing bubble. Okay, the prices are rising like anything, and all of these houses are mostly bought by the Chinese multimillionaires because they want to stash their money into some kind of foreign safe havens. Okay, so there are many instances of homeless people in Sydney and Melbourne. Okay, so this kind of this kind of unfettered immigration that all of these Western countries have started really goes on to say the kind of cultural damage that it is going to do to the fabric of Australia in the near future, you know. So Australia, Canada, America, all of these are immigrant countries, okay. They do not have any ethnicity, okay. So they do not have any culture inside of them. So Australia had aboriginal people as its native people, right? Like what America had had with the Native Americans, right? The American Indians, that's what they call them in America. Even Canada has grappled with the indigenous peoples issues for a long time. So the people who are majority in Australia right now, the white majority, they are not native of Australia, okay. They are just the people of European descent, okay. And the native people of Australia are called Aboriginal people, and those are the people that were completely wiped out, okay, from Australia, and they were replaced by the white population, okay. The one more thing that I really want to point out here is that Australia is a very arid country, okay. It's a very dry country. 80 to 85% of Australia is completely covered in desert, right? That's why almost all of the Australia's population lives on the coastal areas. So if you look at all the cities, the major cities in Australia, all of them are on the coasts, whether it is Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth, you name it, right? All of these cities are just on the coastal areas, because the outback, the what is called a desert in the middle part of Australia, it is just a very scary place to live in, okay. Even today people say that Australia, if the weather does not kill you, then the animals and insects are going to kill you. So so that's what they say, like the weather is so harsh in Australia, okay, because it's very hot, right? And because Australia is in the southern hemisphere, that's why when we have when most of the countries in northern hemisphere have winters, they have summers in Australia, right? So there is summer in Australia in Christmas, okay. That's just how the northern and southern hemisphere thing works, right? So there is summer in Australia in Christmas, and there is winter in May, the exact opposite of what most of the people in the developed world are used to, right? Like if you live in Europe or North America or India or China or Russia, all of these countries are in the northern hemisphere, okay. So that's why all of them have the same kind of season cycles, but not Australia, okay, because Australia is in the southern hemisphere, okay. That's the first thing. Second thing is Australia is very hot to live in, right? Like in temperature wise, there are instances where temperatures literally go above 40 degrees, even they reach 50 degrees in Australia. So not a very friendly place to live in. That's why for centuries not many people have lived in Australia, and that's why they need immigration from outside, okay. So that's why they say that the population will increase, but most of that increase is just going to be with immigration, right? So now, culturally diverse, with Australians living longer and working later, not only are our communities more generationally diverse, they are also more culturally diverse. Look at I will just dissect a few sentences in here. With Australians living longer and working later, imagine this, okay. Australians are living longer, right? I mean, people are just not dying, as I said, right? They're just living beyond 80, beyond 90, and they're working later. What does working later mean? Like, people are not able to retire in Australia, okay. So why is that? Because the cost of living is so high. In Australia the cost of living is really very high. I mean, even if you consider the Big Mac index, right? So if the Big Mac index is the index which tells you what is the cost of living in each of these countries, right? So Australia is definitely costlier than America and Canada, okay. There's just no doubt about that, okay. So that's why people are not able to retire, okay. That's why they are just keeping on working. I have seen old people work in McDonald's in America, and same thing is also true in Australia, okay. That's why it says here, right, with Australians living longer and working later, okay, not only are our communities more generationally diverse, they are also more culturally diverse, okay. So I will go through the next statement. With migration a key driver of our population growth, Australia is more culturally diverse than any other developed nation on the planet, okay. I'll just read this one more time. With migration a key driver of our population growth. Migration a key driver of our population growth. As I said, these countries are growing only and only because of migration, okay. Because nobody is giving birth to any more children in these countries, because people are just too self-sufficient, they are just too smug, they are just too selfish, that they don't want to bear the burden of a child, okay. So that's why they need people from outside to fund that kind of fund all the schemes that Australia has launched for its citizens. Okay, so Australia is more culturally diverse than any other developed nation on the planet. Imagine this. Okay, 3 in 10 Australians, 29% were born overseas. That's twice the population of overseas born residents in the US and UK. Imagine this, okay? That's twice the proportion of overseas born residents in the US or the UK. Okay, that's why Australia is just becoming very, very culturally diverse. And to be honest, I think, when a country loses its core identity, that country just stops functioning as a country. Okay, so all these countries like Canada, America, Australia, New Zealand, even UK right now, right? So all of these countries are just so culturally diverse that if you want to name a person as Australian, you cannot do that, because they have lost their cultural identity. Okay, so I'm not a big fan of Trump, but I do agree with a few things that he says. Okay, if a nation loses its own cultural identity, then it has nothing to rely on. Okay, so India, China, Korea, these are ethnic countries. Okay, Japan is an ethnic country. So when you want to name a person from India, you can say that okay, this person is from India or this person is from China, because they have some kind of traits that you can associate with these people, but not with Australia, not with Canada. Okay, so that's one of the drawbacks of culturally diverse countries, and that's what Australia is about to become. Okay, so by 2030, the only source of population growth for Australia is going to be by immigration. And immigration from where, right? All of these so-called developing countries like India, like China, like Africa, right? So all these countries will be sending people to Australia. And how do they recruit people? I've made video about this, okay, where I say that why international students are cash cows for Australia. Okay, please check out that video and you will understand why Australia needs to recruit people from these countries, right? There are recruiting agents for universities in India, in China, in Africa, okay, that recruit students to come and pay twice the tuition fee in Australia. Okay, so that their country can keep on functioning. Okay, so that's how all of these rich countries are scamming all the people, even the immigrants, the permanent residents, the work visa holders, and the students, to come to their countries and start a life over there. Okay, the main reason why I started this channel is because I really want to get my opinions out without any holds barred. Okay, absolute truth and nothing but the truth. Okay, so if you come here for the truth, I can guarantee that you will get the truth from this channel. Okay, I will not just sugarcoat anything that needs to be told in a very brutal fashion. Okay, so this is the brutality, this is the reality of why all of these so-called rich countries need people from developing countries, the so-called developing countries, to come there and pay heavy taxes to them, pay heavy taxes for like 40-50 years, so that they can keep on encashing on that tax revenue. Okay, and just imagine this, now the standard of living is also growing in India and China, right? So if the standard of living just comes at par with that of Australia, people will not find any incentive to go to Australia at that point. Okay, so that's why Australia is just trying to encash on this kind of scenario in India and China as long as it lasts, because Australia knows that once it loses the market from India and China, it does not have anywhere else to go. Okay, imagine this, so the existential crisis that all these countries face, the so-called developed countries face, is just maddeningly insane. Okay, and that's why I do not see any good future for Australia by 2030. That's just my honest assessment. Aging population, this is also a very important thing that all the developed countries are going through. Australia is also experiencing a rapid aging of the population. Absolutely true. Look at this, people just think that Australia has very good lifestyle. Look at these two sentences, just to give you an idea. Australians are working later. Okay, so they are not able to retire because they just want to keep on working, because if they stop working, they will not be able to feed themselves. And Australia is also experiencing a rapid aging of the population, right? So these two things combined, do you think old age will be good in Australia? I mean, if you think that, then I don't know what else to say, right? So old age is a very brutal thing in most of these developed countries. Please understand this. Within a decade, Australia will have more people aged over 65 than under 18 for the first time in century. Look at this. One more important thing to understand, I will read this again. Within a decade, So that is by 2030, Australia will have more people aged over 65 than under 18 for the first time in history. There will be more old people in Australia than young people. Do you think that is a good thing for any society? Forget that I'm talking about Australia. In any community, if you think that the old people are going to surpass the young people, do you think that's a good statistic? Just ask yourself very very clearly and wholeheartedly. So that's why I say that all these countries are just depending upon the desperation of foreign immigrants to come to their countries and pay taxes to them. Okay, there's just no doubt about that. There are multiple sentences in here that prove what I'm saying. Nowhere are the implications more significant than in employment, right? Look at this. Nowhere are the implications more significant than in employment. An aging population leads to an aging workforce. Absolutely true. Aging population leads to an aging workforce. So what does it mean by aging workforce? Is people are just continuing to work for the rest of their lives until the day they die. There are instances in America where an old person is literally locked up in a McDonald's bathroom, and when the body starts stinking, then people come there and see that, okay, this person has just committed suicide. Okay, so because many old people even now work in McDonald's in America for $8 an hour. Okay, imagine this. And this is the life of the people in the so-called developed countries, in the so-called rich countries. So I've made videos about this where I really expose the kind of agenda that all of these so-called developed countries are using to lure desperate immigrants into their countries. Okay, so look at this. In the coming years, Australia's working age population 15 to 64 is projected to decline as the proportion of the total population. The working age population, which is 15 to 64 years old, is projected to decline. Okay, is projected to decline as the proportion of total population. No wonder why these countries need immigrants from outside. Okay, now you understand. 4. Generationally diverse. From 2019, there will be more Australians born after 1980 than before it. Look at this. Okay, so this is an old article, I understand it, but it gives a very good projection of what Australia will look like by 2030. Okay, there will be more Australians born after 1980 than before it. Imagine this. People are not giving birth. Half of the Australians don't even get married. The people who get married don't even want to have children. This is the tragedy of the current so-called developed society and the so-called 21st century, and the liberal mindset. And that's why I've made videos about this where I call out the so-called fake liberals and limousine liberals. Okay, this means that Gen Y, born from 1980 to 1994, Gen Z, born from 1995 to 2009, and Gen Alpha, born since 2010, will comprise more than half of the population. Okay. Additionally, from 2019, Gen Y and Gen Z will comprise the majority of the workforce. They will outnumber Gen X and the baby boomers for the first time. This will see Gen Y and Gen Z dominate as workers, consumers, new household formers, and therefore the key groups to engage with, right? So they are all becoming very generationally diverse, but at the same time, what that means is that the workforce is aging. Okay, the workforce is aging. What that means is that people will have to work longer. Even in Canada right now, people are supposed to work until 70 before they can encash their retirement benefits. Okay, so the government is just increasing the age limit of how much you have to work before you can encash the retirement benefit. This is just another example of that. Okay, in a growing economy, there is a need to fill the ongoing labor demands as well as replace retiring or downshifting staff. At the strategic level, the knowledge and leadership of the baby boomers needs to be effectively transferred to the Gen X and Gen Y leaders and the emerging Gen Zs. With all these generations mixing in the workforce, we need to understand the key differences to embrace this diversity. Okay, this embracing of diversity is all just plain BS, to be very honest with you. Okay, I have really called out this kind of hiding behind the bush sort of mentality that all of these countries start portraying. So all of them are just relying on the foreign immigration that is coming to their countries to pay them taxes so that they can keep on funding this kind of happy-go-lucky lifestyle that most of the people in Australia enjoy. Okay, socially changing. In addition to the demographic shifts, Social trends are also changing Australian communities. With greater cultural diversity comes greater religious diversity. It is also a very important thing. Okay, look at this. In 1966, almost 9 in 10, 88% Australians identified as Christians. This compares to 52.1% Christian today. So why they are only comparing Christians? Because it's a Christian majority country. Okay, you cannot deny that. Okay, so but what I'm trying to say is that the cultural identity of that country just gets completely demolished. That's why I'm not in favor of this so-called fake liberals and the leftist leftist people that just want to keep on pushing the kind of narrative about mass immigration and religious what do you call that, immunity sort of thing. Okay, but and people are also projecting that Islam is going to be the most dominant religion by 2030. Okay, imagine this. And why do you think Islam is going to be the most dominant religion? Because Islam only survives on conversion. Okay, so Islam was spread by there's this famous saying in my language where Islam was spread with one hand having Quran and other hand having a sword, right? So either you accept the Quran or we will chop your head off. Okay, that's how Islam spread, and that's how it is also spreading right now. Okay, so Islam will be the dominant religion in most of the Western countries by 2030. That is my honest assessment. Okay, please mark my words. Okay, the kind of Islamization that is happening in Brussels, in Netherlands, in Germany, in France, in Italy, in Spain, in UK, in America, in Canada, in Australia, in New Zealand, that's just staggering. Okay, there are ghettos in UK. Okay, there are ghettos in Paris. There are ghettos in Netherlands. Okay, in Brussels. Okay, so where people literally fear to even go there. There is a place called Malmo in Sweden. Okay, which is so scary that people, even normal people, even police don't want to go there. There's a place called Malmo in Sweden. Okay, just try to find about it. Okay, so all of these countries are just having this mass immigration from Islamic countries, and that is just going to destroy the cultural fabric of these countries. That is my honest assessment. Okay, those who profess faith at a different kind has grown from 0.7 in 1966 to 8.2 in 2016. The proportion of Australians with secular and other spiritual beliefs, no religion, has grown from less than 1%, 0.8, to 30.1% over the same time period. Okay, so I'll just look at the last line here. The emerging generations are also beginning their earning years in debt. Okay, look at this. The emerging generations are also beginning their earning years in debt, staying at home longer, and delaying traditional life markers such as getting married and having children. Okay, I will repeat the last line. The emerging generations are also beginning their years in debt. Okay, they're earning years in debt. As I've said, every person who is born in the so-called developed world is really born with a whole lot of debt on their shoulders. What does it mean by having debt on your shoulders? Just try to understand this. All of these countries have a huge debt to GDP ratio. Okay, so if you look at the US debt right now, it is almost 24 trillion. Okay, imagine this. So any person that is born in America right now, which is born like an American citizen right now, he or she will have to shell all the taxes. Okay, because how does the government pay off the debt? Just try to understand this. This is a very important macroeconomics concept where I'm trying to explain how does a country try to pay off the debt, right? It increases the taxes on its citizens. Okay, that's the exact same kind of playbook that all the countries employ. So that's why it is saying here, emerging generations are also beginning their earning years in debt. Okay, staying at home longer. Staying at home longer, what does that mean? They cannot afford to buy a home, they cannot afford to start a family, they cannot afford to get married, they cannot afford to start children. This is the situation of the people, young people in the so-called developed country of Australia. Okay, and I have seen many people who are so desperate to go to Australia that they will literally just hang on to the first opportunity that they get to come to Australia. Okay, this is what the world looks like in Australia of young people. And dealing traditional life markers, people are dealing traditional life markers, okay, such as getting married and having children. This is the situation right now in Australia, and do you think it is going to get any better by 2030? Definitely not. Okay, Australia is a pretty defensive country. Australia has had not that much amount of say on the world stage, and Australia has a very complicated relationship with China. Okay, even the Australian Prime Minister is decided by China. Remember this. Okay, if you go to the Australian airports, you can see signs in two languages. One is in English, which is the official language of Australia, and second is Mandarin. Imagine this. In a country like Australia, on the airports, you can see signs in Mandarin. Why is that? Because Australia has a huge amount of Chinese influence. Okay, Australia has a huge amount of Chinese visitors every year. Australia has a huge amount of Chinese students every year, and I've made a video about this where Chinese students are saying that they are cash cows for Australia. Same thing with New Zealand as well. Okay, New Zealand also has the same kind of terminology where most of their signs at the airports are in English and also in Mandarin. Okay, so Australia is to China what Canada is to America. Okay, remember this. Okay, Australia cannot survive without China. China is literally owning Australia at this point. Okay, if tomorrow China stops trading with Australia, Australia will go bankrupt. That is a very frank assessment that I'm giving you right now. Also, Australia is a very isolated country. That's why it needs to import everything. Okay, and that's why it has import duties on every small product. Okay, even if you buy a small toothbrush or even very small things. Okay, all of them are just very very heavily taxed. That's why it's not very easy to live in Australia if you don't have enough money. Okay, Australia is a pretty costly place to live in, very frankly speaking. Okay, so it's not a very decent way to spend your life in your old age. Definitely not. Australian government and most of these developed countries governments tell you that they are going to give you pension, but do you know how big the pension is? Do you know how big the pension is in Canada? You can literally just scrape by on that pension. Okay, instead of that, you can live in a country like India and save too much for your retirement, and you can live a very good life. Okay, forget about relying on the government. Okay, the government is just going to give you very small things. Okay, literally so small things that you cannot even survive for the daily expenses on the pension that you get in Canada. Okay, or in Australia or in America. Okay, so this is what the reality looks like in most of these so-called developed countries. So this was my analysis of what Australia will look like by 2030. Okay, so if you like my analysis of this article, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, as I will upload more 19 videos regarding this series about the world in 2030. And also like, comment and share this video, and don't forget to check back to my channel again for the other videos about all the other G20 countries. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye bye.